Alright, well, here we are at what, the 3:30 turn in Antietam, and McClellan decides to blow another McClellan point. I haven't resolved that yet. He's written orders to Pleasanton to run down here across Myers Ford and try to get down to here. Now, I may need to force march to do this. He's got orders also to avoid the enemy where possible until he reaches this kind of end stretch in here where the victory points actually are. I may need to use the forced march rules here, which require straggler checks. They are cav, though, so depending on when they get moving, they might be able to make it without that. But Ninth Corps is still moving on, which is important because I still have not taken Sharpsburg yet. I'd have to have fallen back a hex at least and not be engaging that heavily, or not be engaging at all. Sixth Corps is still moving, but the Second Corps decided only a 2 would fail. They don't want to pursue this attack anymore. They've taken the sunken road and now they can fall back. That's kind of an interesting reprieve for the Confederates. Seeing that, they may be able to keep this defensive line here and try to hold the church a little longer. Beyond that, though, I'm not sure how much is really of great value. This is so worthwhile as a defensive location. It sucks to have abandoned it now. But who knows? Maybe the 6th will get driven back. Maybe pigs will fly. I don't know. I really don't know. So that's a major effect. I've got to check this sucker, though. We've done an in-person complex at 0 again. Pleasanton's none too good. He's just a 1. So that gets us 1, 3, 2, 0. I'll be here on the 0 or 1 table. But at least it doesn't cost me any anti-initiatives. And it turns out that's it's going to be a D2. Just missed the D1. But you can see the actual orders writing portion is not the big bookkeeping in the game. The big bookkeeping's on here. It's simpler than doing it on counters. If I looked at the RSS option of doing it on counters, I've played Terrible Swift Sword. This is just easier. It really is. It's not. It actually removes some of the burden. Although, if you hate keeping track of things on paper, well, you could always pull out, an RSS game or Great Battles of the American Civil War and try to keep track of losses that way. The problem is you get these letter components, so you really do actually have to do the hits on here. RSS is able to do it with the numbered shits because they have a straight strength point value to the things. Here with these different fight levels, that isn't really an option. But it's not that big a burden in my opinion. Oh, a dolorous day. If you watch what I've been doing or my life, there's always a lot of noise out there. Well, this was the last day of that until they decide to build something new there. They cleared the trenching company out on me. All right. Not really sure there's anything to say here. The Union continued their push here, and they kind of took some damage over on this section. It kind of took some damage here too. We got some units routing away. It's kind of turning into an ugly slog though around Sharpsburg itself, where if the Union has a chance to win, that's where it's going to be decided, I think. If they can't take Sharpsburg, they cannot win. If they can take it, well, we'll see how it all boils down. Right now I've only got 2 corps moving, and the 9th Corps is not in good shape, and they have a hard job getting it. But the 6th Corps is planning on heading down to Sharpsburg. That is an interesting factor in their orders, as opposed to the 2nd Corps, which didn't have those orders. We got nobody heading down here, though. So these are, except for the cav, perhaps. So those are kind of not really a factor in the game right now. Well, after the 3:30 turn, it's becoming quite a mess. Now, Lee's pulled back here. Pulled his army supplies back, even though he's got an out-of-ammo unit there. he can't risk the Army supply wagon. He's got a Corps supply wagon here and one here, and he's having trouble kind of getting them into place. These guys are just pushing along with the artillery and D.H. Hill's division. By the way, A.P. Hill's division is in crappy shape. And the reason for that is he just got hammered a few days earlier over in South Mountain. So that's part of the thing. A lot of these units that are really weak, they're weak because of South Mountain here. But anyway, that includes Union units too, which seem to be a little under strength. Trying to extricate Hill. The rest of this force, well, I got like weak points where their cannons are exposed just because there weren't enough troops to cover. They got shot away. But, you know, trying my best to hold this kind of line here, because if I can halt the 6th Corps, then there's 6 points sitting in these woods in here. Another 13 that's basically this hex. Evans can't advance. Without some kind of orders, I can't march into Sharpsburg. Now I'm hoping these guys can eventually, but they haven't been following their orders. So that would be helpful. And then of course launching something like this. But the 10 point or the 13 points for Sharpsburg could be counteracted by 10 points for these two areas if the Union cav gets its ass down there. There's not a lot of time left though. 2.5 hours. We may not be seeing the historical McClellan here, who's terrified of giving up his position across on Antietam Creek. We are still seeing an interesting McClellan. This is someone who it feels like is moving chess pieces on a board rather than actually fighting a battle. He deploys one unit, it halts. He deploys another unit to attack, it halts. So it is an interesting view of him as a general in this particular situation, which I don't know if he particularly was known for that kind of thinking. But you would kind of look at it and say, wow, that would be really awful to see somebody doing that. You know, wait until they get here. Okay, everything's deployed. Now the cav can go around and cut off their retreat. Okay, we'll wait till they get there. Maybe tomorrow we'll launch an attack to drive them back. You know, it's just such an amazing type of imagery that comes to my mind of his mind in this, the way it's being represented in this particular game. Because of the McClellan points and because of my not being as comfortable with the points as I should be, not really maintaining what they were intended to do. Well, the 9th Corps crapped out on its attack. 6th Corps here is looking a lot worse than I thought it was. I had these delusions that it would swing through here fairly easily, that these Confederates were pretty weak. They're holding out pretty well, actually, and actually beginning to knock the 6th Corps down. You can see the T6 division is pretty much wrecked, although one unit, Hancock's command, is untouched for the most part. But, you know, one of them is down in the I'm not useful anymore category. The other division is in okay shape, a little bit more evenly distributed up here. Had to focus on taking some guns out. There were a couple of guns the Confederates left open, one here and one here. Not intentionally, they had retreats, I think, from them, where I could shoot the guns out individually. Those are almost always worth doing, just because the guns get to fire even if infantry are stacked with them on top of them, protecting them. And the guns are quite potent, especially defensively. Offensively, they're less valuable. You can see I'm kind of screening my own guns here. I was doing better before that, but I need to press forward. Some Straggler recovery. I haven't recovered my morale yet. I have to do that. And other than that, though, it looks kind of scary for McClellan. You know, I'm keeping a vague count on points, but not doing it directly. But I'm beginning to think I may want to try to throw the 2nd Corps back into play again next turn if I get a shot. I didn't move McClellan, though. I took these hits before that. I was thinking, geez, I'm okay. So it's going to be a couple turns before he does, and that's a point I blow that probably won't get me anything. There's a good chance that if I issue an order now, it's not going to do anything. So maybe he'll just call it the night and hope he gets what he can. I don't know, though. I really need Sharpsburg, and as long as that hex is held, I don't have it. Into the Rebel turn here on 4 p.m. They're actually having trouble. They can't find anywhere they can rally some of the Early's division here. That's under Lawton. I don't know what happened to Early. He's not around. Probably wounded or something. But anywhere within command range of this is within 3 hexes of 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, I think I can get them here. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I can get them right there. So I'll put a straggler recovery there. But it was really hard to find, and the Union could just fire some artillery at this hex and wipe out the straggler attempts. The problem is, you know, these really damaged units, recovering them, it's not that valuable. It probably worth the ammo, the LE and TE2. I wouldn't have this information available as the Union, but you know, they're not going to be much more than a strength point, able to fire a fire point once maybe and then get wiped out. But you know, it's not like I'm particularly low on Union artillery ammo there. I got 200 rounds left. Have not been using it much. Usually don't use much attacking. It's tough. You can do lots of long-range bombardment, but it doesn't do much. It might cause some... If you can find artillery to shoot at from the enemy, it's well worth it, because you can consider conglomerate your fire, and even at long ranges, add up and get to a point level where you could damage a gun. And knocking out some guns at long range is worthwhile, just because you won't have to face them when you come up. They'll be gone. It's kind of strange in this game, in the whole series. Guns usually don't count anything for victory points. You can knock out guns. They're not going to help your victory point situation, but they definitely help your tactical position on the board to get rid of the enemy's gun. Confederates really shouldn't have stayed in this position as long as they did. Not only did I knock out that one the stragglers trying to recover, but Hood's unit was here, the Texans, and they they turned around to face the threat from the 6th, but turned their asses to the 5th Corps, which then started firing long-range artillery fire at them. If you can get flank shots and stuff, it's worth it. You can light them up, and they ended up taking a casualty that way. Their artillery, they still didn't bother to fill in the gun here. It got knocked out. Definitely running into some problems just because of the clutter and the confusion in the situation right in that area. On the other hand, the 6th is pretty much hosed. It's not going to make it forward anytime soon. Hopefully I'm taking a lot of breaks. I'm playing Scandinavia with my wife right now. So hopefully I'll have a chance to remember what I'm supposed to do and actually try to get units out of here and or move McClellan. But, you know, I think this battle is pretty much decided. I'm not sure to what extent. It's going to be a close one no matter what. I think the Union's going to lose, though, as they probably should. Sit down for the 4:30 turn. Been thinking, well, the 6th Corps is pretty damn hosed. But it's not affecting corps stoppage yet, actually. Neither division is wrecked. Yes, this one's chewed up. Chewed all to hell. But it's not a wrecked division yet. It requires all 3 brigades to go. So these divisions and corps have a lot more sustainability than it seems they might. Kind of an interesting concept where you might want to pull a unit into reserve to recover. In particular here, we're looking at the 2-6. It's taking a lot of damage. It might be neat to pull it back. The problem is I don't have enough force to punch my way through without... Well, I just may not have enough force to punch my way through. But certainly without the extra units. So I think I'm going to have to keep going. The Cav isn't active, but I am remembering to move my... We push to the Confederate side of the turn. We're seeing this is just, you know, disintegrating, but on both sides, really. Sixth Corps is losing troops, but so are the Confederates just disappearing. There's less in here because it's pretty easy with these good quality Confederate tiny units to make sure that every single strength point gets on the map and gets killed. I got a little bit of a dead pile here, not much of one. You don't usually see much in these games. In fact, this one with the tiny units tends to have very high proportions of losses. And the Confederates are beginning the slow process of pulling their units out. Long Jackson, I think, I don't know who it was. This unit here, J.R. Jones, he managed to give him orders on initiative. He got lucky. I would have emergency withdrawn if he hadn't gotten orders. But he's pulled back here. He's going to keep going until he gets to Hauser Ridge down below the landing road. Basically planning on providing more of a defensive front over here. I'm not really interested in being in this area anymore. If I can't hold these, the woods and the church here, and obviously the road, there's no real reason for me to be extended out there. But I do want my formation to have a little bit of direction heading this way, simply because that gives it more stability if the 9th Corps comes in. Now, it's not going to, but that's okay. Finally got some reloads. There's a supply wagon here, and then that'll pull back to the Army supply. It needs to replenish its own. It's a slow process pulling those individual units out, though, and I gotta tell you, that's another factor against what this Confederate command structure is like. It doesn't make sense. I mean, they couldn't have held up in fights if they were as restricted as they are under these rules. There was a wing organization. Maybe it wasn't as explicit and controlled as the Corps organization, but there had to be a way of saying, look, let's get them all out of here, and sending that order out en masse, not, oh, I think I'll stop by and discuss with this general and see if he agrees with what the general wing order actually is. It's one thing to do that with special purpose units or with the Corps commanders themselves, but it gets a little ridiculous when you take it to this level using the same charts and the same probabilities. It just doesn't work. A little bit of excitement here. 2nd Corps got its orders to go through Sharpsburg and secure the town. That's in D1, so they could conceivably get that. The cav activated, and you can see they're charging down to follow their orders. But the 6th Corps is doing weird things. They're slicing across, trying to follow their orders. They have to secure the road, basically, and then they're going to launch their attack on Sharpsburg from that direction. But this allows them to kind of slip around the Confederate line and get some flanking fire on Jackson. To me, it would be kind of an iffy thing. They could have continued their attack as they were going, or they could do this. And this looked kind of cool. It gives them a chance to recover some stragglers back there, and some cool stuff overall. On the Confederate turn, they kind of conform their troops into a somewhat better shape, I guess. It looks like it's about over here. I've got 2 more turns, right? The Union's 6th Corps gets to make a shot at cutting down and seeing if it can dislodge this little force here. But the Confederates are pretty happy with the screen they have. In fact, they have a kind of nice position with the 6th Corps pulling back in this direction. That opens the woods up, and they can take them again using Stuart's cav, which is basically free to do whatever it likes. And if I get 1 unit into the woods at all, I've taken 3 points away from the Union. I don't know about standing up here on this hill with all those guns there. That doesn't seem like a wise idea, but the woods seems like something I can do. That cav, I don't think it can make it. Earlier I had spoken of force marching, but that's only available to infantry. Cav can't do that. They get a lot of movement, but the particular place where I gave orders for the crossing down here at Myers Ford means I have to walk through this. I can't just even cut down the road here. There was a reason for that, was to avoid the enemy. There's also some interest as to whether or not Walker And perhaps AP Hill will launch an attack on Sharpsburg here. I don't know. But I don't think the Union's going to get much more than they have, and they may lose some of what they've got. This little swing around maneuver was not a good move for the 6th Corps. I should have just continued the way I was. So at least where I was protecting the West Woods. I'm not going to make it anywhere, and I'm still, going to have to fight through that entire Confederate line. And now I've got like I said, I got the freedom to move these guys, but I can actually swing this line out a little bit and no longer be in this really terrible little clump that was a real problem. Where, if I turned to face the 6th Corps, I was taking enfilade shots in the ass, and that's why I had to design that way I did, pull back from where I was. Elsewhere, well, the Cav is making its little run down. It's not going to make it. And 2nd Corps, it's late in the day. Maybe after dinner we'll discuss what we'll do tomorrow, right? With AP Hill on the road, or in the field, he and Walker take a quick charge forward. Walker finally gets his orders. AP Hill had I made a roll for an initiative to try to brush through. This is probably a waste. More a matter of, let's drive the Union out of the town. But there's no real great value to it. One of the things in a lot of these battles, there's no real great value to anything. The Union can always fall back to its position that it was in, that was a fairly good defensive one. There's no way the Confederates are going to push an attack here. The only question is whether they're going to get caught on the Potomac and really decimated by this battle. And that's obviously not the case. They're going to be able to withdraw in good order. We're at the end of the line. Now this is technically a straggler recovery turn on an hour, but I'm not going to bother with it. The reason being, any units that are able to recover stragglers aren't going to really be able to fire or have any effect in the play, as far as I can tell. So I'm going to ignore that aspect of it, and well, we'll see what happens. There's not much that could happen for the Union. 2nd Corps might get moving, but it can't possibly cover the distance. 6th Corps is bottled up where it is. The Cav's not going to make it anywhere. So we're pretty much done. It's just a matter of, well, how does Hill and Walker, how do they do in terms of hitting the 9th Corps? Do they took damage coming in. There were cannons all over there, and the Union's got tons of artillery ammo left. So that wasn't a wise move, I'd have to say. That was the final Union turn, and the 6th Corps did sort of an impressive job of pushing back, finally, the Confederates there. They've, shown themselves as the most impressive, I think, of the units that the Union's thrown into the battle so far. The only one that's really kept going. Just kind of got lucky by not getting anything wrecked, and they're a good unit. Not terribly big, but they've been able to do a lot of work. It's not going to amount to much, though, because the Confederates are going to get to go to the West Woods. And the Confederates are also pushing their way into Sharpsburg, which, doesn't mean anything victory point-wise, but it gives me kind of a moral victory. The Cav got as far as it could, not quite to Harper's Ferry Road. That's definitely a threat, to have the Cav tromping around behind you. But it's one that the Confederates can deal with as they withdraw from the site. All right, well, we're on to the final little step. We are at the end of the battle. Only exciting thing that really happened, AP Hill took a bullet and was killed right in the very end of the battle. That's going to affect the Confederate Army somewhat. It doesn't affect points. It's just a divisional commander. He doesn't matter in this. Overall, not a lot's changed. The Confederate line looks a lot better here now. Actually facing the Union, not stuck like some nasty impediment just thrust into them. Now It's actually a line. The 6th Corps, hey, if they had time, I wouldn't be surprised if they could just march their way down this line. They're not that much bigger, but they've been holding up pretty well. They certainly could gain some ground. But as it is, that's not what this battle is about. It's the end of the day. The Confederates have done pretty well in my book. We'll take a look at how the points crack down. And this is even with a very active McClellan who's thrown every single unit into play. Like I said, that kind of chess-like attitude of, oh, I've moved a piece, now I'm in position, now I move another piece. For the Confederacy, it felt more like just throwing what I can in the way when I can. And more just rolling dice. You don't get to write a lot of orders and see them really take effect when you're playing an almost entirely defensive game. There's very little for the Confederates to do offensively here, except what we did right at the end, this charge into Sharpsburg, to assure that, hey, that one space, that's a little cheap. We did a little better than that, grabbing this. I actually got up. Jackson gave orders to his old division. J.R. Jones here is in charge of it, to pull up, and those were immediately accepted. He's the old commander. We got to listen to him, right? All that's left is counting the points. I'll come back after I do that. I'm pretty sure the Union took a pretty heavy beating here because, I was counting on taking all of this and it being close. So 16 points, that's a big swing. Or not, I was spot on with the casualty tracks, actually. That's astounding. Anyway, came out to 161 Union casualties, 139 Confederate. Now, of course, that's in hundreds, so we're talking a total of close to 30,000. Way over again. Any game seems to cause greater casualties than the historical battle. These do a better job than, say, the great battles of the American Civil War tend to. But players are willing to put their troops through more. If we had been playing with the defense stoppage rules, we probably would have gotten closer to the accurate casualty rates, just because the Confederate forces would actually break when suffering badly enough. The problem with those is they don't take into account, say, defensive terrain or something. In some cases, like the fortifications, if most of the division or whatever is sitting in there, it should receive a bonus, and that's not factored in. Or if you're sitting on very good terrain, like Culp's Hill, you shouldn't have to suffer quite as bad a defense failure. There should be a modifier. There's a lot of modifiers there already in terms of not taking a lot of damage and in terms of individual units not breaking. But for the Corps itself, or for the division in this case, there's no real way of representing that, where if you're in what would be considered good defensive terrain for the most part, your whole command isn't going to flee from it as easily. All right, so that's the casualties. That works out to only 30 points for the Confederates, 40 for the Union. Union gets another 16 in locations. That's these 11 plus 5 here. They didn't get anything else. They lost the woods there. That's a 6-point swing overall we'll look at. They obviously didn't get Sharpsburg. That would have been the game if they had, actually. It's a 14-point difference because of 40 McClellan points. Now, here's kind of the problem. You got no idea what McClellan points mean. If you took those out of the equation, this looks like a pretty good Union victory. They've taken a good part of the field. They've done a lot of damage to the Confederates. Yeah, they took more. Of course, the question could be, how bad does McClellan feel about this, and does it mean he withdraws? Anyway, I don't know how much that makes sense, though. If McClellan acted more vigorously here, does that really mean he would do more poorly afterwards or something? It's just a game mechanism to score the game and to try to make you play more like McClellan, but it's tough to do. It really is. So we ended up with a 14-point difference after throwing that in. And 14 points is a minor rebel victory. The historical was something like a -3, which puts it in the draw range. Trying to think if anything, some of it is just the delays on units and such. Not the Cav could have done something impressive and scored some more points. That 6-point difference would have dropped it still to a -8. This did not determine the game. Sharpsburg certainly did, though, right? Oh no, it's not a 6-point difference. It's only a 3-point difference. That's not points that the Confederates get. It would be really tough to play this really paying more attention to the McClellan points and trying to be more careful with them. I was trying. Unfortunately, my trying was, my unit is damaged. I don't want to send it back into battle. Well, let's send something new in. And you just keep paying again and again on the commitments there. So that's, it's a hard situation to represent. All right, I'm going to clean this up. I'm actually going to come back with a review, because without a review, I can't really post this on 2D6, and then I won't put it over on Consim World's News. And I think this is an interesting playthrough. Plus, I have some interesting things to say in the review, I suspect. Nothing you haven't heard before. All right, up it goes.